Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The reservation was under my name. It had been under my name for 11 years. Ever since Marcus Delaney, then a city councilman running his first real campaign on borrowed funds and borrowed courage, asked me to handle his logistics team for what everyone privately called a suicide mission. He won by 4 points. 6 years later, he was governor of the state of Virginia. He sent flowers every year on the anniversary of that election. He showed up at my daughter's christening in a borrowed car because his security detail had the day off, and he held Zara in his arms for 40 minutes and refused to give her back. He was her godfather because he asked. Because I had been one of the people who believed in him before believing was a safe thing to do. None of my family knew any of this. Not because I hid it, but because they had never, not once in 11 years, asked me what I actually did. My name is Simone Adeyemi Carr. I am 39 years old. I run a political strategy and public affairs firm called Meridian Consulting, which I founded at 27 with a laptop, a sublet office share in Arlington, and a client list of exactly one. Marcus Delaney, City Council candidate, District 7, Richmond, Virginia. We now have 41 employees. Our client roster includes 3 sitting senators, 2 governors, a constellation of state legislators, and a Fortune 100 corporation that hired us to manage a federal regulatory crisis that I am not at liberty to name. Our annual revenue last year crossed $18 million. I own 73% of the firm. I also own, through a holding company, a partial interest in the restaurant where my father's birthday dinner was being held. That detail will matter later. I am telling you all of this now because my family would not have believed any of it if I had told them. They had decided years before I had anything to show who I was. Once a family decides that, evidence rarely changes the verdict. It only changes the sentencing. My father, Dr. Emmanuel Adeyemi, is a retired cardiologist. He is 71 years old, elegant in the way that men of his generation and profession often are, precise, controlled, accustomed to rooms arranging themselves around him. He's not a cruel man. That is important to say. He is a man who loves in a language I spent 30 years trying to learn before I understood it was not a language I was ever going to be fluent in. He loves through approval. He dispenses it carefully like a controlled substance, to the people he believes have earned it. My older sister Diane earned it young and never lost it. She became a physician. She married a physician. She lives 12 minutes from my parents in McLean. She calls every Sunday. I became a political operative. I moved 40 miles away. I called when I could. I missed Sundays. In my father's accounting, this translated into a kind of permanent deficit. Not a failure exactly, but a falling short. A chronic almost. He never said he was disappointed in me. He simply directed his pride elsewhere, and I learned to recognize the shape of that absence the way you learn to recognize a drafty spot in a room. My mother, Patricia, is a different matter. She is not calculating. She is enthusiastic, which is sometimes worse. She loves her image of her family more than she loves her family, and her image had no room for a daughter whose work was difficult to explain at dinner parties. Simone does consulting, she would say with a small apologetic gesture, as if consulting were something I was doing while I figured out what I really wanted to be. Aunt Carol, my mother's youngest sister, is simply a woman who has appointed herself the family's quality control department and has never once been asked to resign. I had Zara at 34 on my own by choice. Her father is a good man I met during a campaign in 2016. We were together for 2 years. We wanted different things. We parted without wreckage. He is present in her life. We are cordial, occasionally warm. She is 5 years old and she already has opinions about seating arrangements, which I find both exhausting and magnificent. My best friend and firm's chief operating officer is a woman named Renata Osibonsu, who has been with me since month 3 of Meridian and who knows where every body is buried, metaphorically speaking. She is the person I call when I need to think out loud, and she is the person who, on the evening of my father's birthday dinner, called me first. "They uninvited you," she said. Not a question. My mother called this afternoon. She said the dinner had grown into something more formal. Important colleagues of my father's. Political people. I paused. She said I would make it awkward. Renata was quiet for a moment. Political people. Her words. Simone. I know. Do you want me to? No, I said. I have a prior engagement anyway. The prior engagement was real and it had been on my calendar for 6 weeks. Governor Marcus Delaney was in Richmond for 2 days of private meetings before a policy announcement. He had asked me, as he did several times a year, to join him for dinner. Not a working dinner, just dinner, the kind old friends have when they are trying to remember they are still people outside of what they do. His team had secured a private dining room at Tavola, which is one of Richmond's finest restaurants and which, as I mentioned, I hold a partial ownership stake in through my holding company, a detail known to the general manager and approximately 3 other people. I had been looking forward to it. Not because of the restaurant or the private room or the security detail that moved quietly through the space. I had been looking forward to it because Marcus was one of the few people in my life who had known me before I had anything, and those people become precious in ways that are hard to articulate. I brought Zara because my usual sitter had a family emergency, and because Marcus had texted that morning. Bring her. I haven't seen her in 2 months and I have a gift that is definitely not age appropriate but that she will love. She wore a green velvet dress she had chosen herself and her good shoes, and she talked the entire car ride about whether the governor's gift was going to be a robot. It's probably not a robot, I said. But it could be, she said. We arrived at Tavola at 7:15. Daniel, the general manager, met us at the door. He is a meticulous man who runs the room like a conductor, and he shook my hand with both of his and bent down to say something to Zara that made her laugh. Table 1 is ready, he said. Governor Delaney's team arrived 20 minutes ago. He's asked that you be seated first, he'll be in shortly. Table 1 at Tavola is not the largest table. It is the table by the east window, the one with the slight elevation, the one visible from every other table in the main dining room. It is the table they give to people they want other people to see. I had eaten there twice before. Both times under circumstances that felt like arriving somewhere I had been building toward without knowing it. Marcus arrived at 7:40 with 2 members of his security detail and his chief of staff, a serious young woman named Priya who I had actually recruited to his team 4 years ago. He walked in, saw Zara, and his entire face changed. There she is, he said, and he took her from me before he even said hello. She gave him the kind of hug children give people they genuinely trust. Full weight, no reservation, and he held her the way men hold children they love without having to perform it. We ordered. We talked. Marcus was tired in the way powerful people get tired. Not from the work but from the performance of the work, the relentless requirement to be legible and confident and decisive in every room. He was relieved to be in a room where he didn't have to be any of those things. Zara told him about her kindergarten teacher and a conflict involving a shared paintbrush that had clearly not resolved to her satisfaction. He listened with complete attention. He had the gift. I was telling him about a regulatory project we were managing for a pharmaceutical client when I heard the sound of my father's voice. I knew the sound before I located it. I have known my father's voice my whole life. The particular resonance of it, the controlled authority. I turned slightly and saw them coming through the main entrance. My father, my mother, my sister Diane and her husband Dr. Gerald Marsh, Aunt Carol, 2 of my father's colleagues from his cardiology days, Dr. Whitfield and his wife, and 1 other couple I didn't recognize. 11 people. My father was already talking mid-story, his hand making the precise gesture he makes when he is performing relaxed. He hadn't seen the room yet. He was looking at my mother as she spoke to the host. It was Diane who saw me first. I watched it happen, the slight falter, the almost imperceptible recalibration of her expression. She touched my mother's arm. My mother turned, looked toward table 1, looked at me, looked at the governor of Virginia holding her granddaughter. My mother's mouth formed a word she didn't say. Then my father turned. He stopped walking. Not a dramatic stop, not a stumble or a lurch. Just a complete and immediate cessation of forward motion, the way a clock stops when the battery dies. He stood in the entrance of Tavola and looked at his daughter seated at the best table in the room, at the governor of the state holding his granddaughter in his arms, and something moved across his face that I had no adequate category for. It was not shame. It was not pride. It was something closer to the vertigo of realizing the map you have been using is wrong. Not slightly off but oriented to an entirely different territory. He took 1 step toward us. Marcus's lead security agent, a compact and unsmiling man named Terry who had worked the governor's detail for 6 years, moved to intercept. Not aggressively. Terry was too professional for aggression. but firmly, positioning himself between my father and table one with the quiet authority of someone whose job is to ensure that the governor's private dinner remains private. My father stopped again. I watched him look at Terry. I watched him look at the security detail positioned at the room's perimeter. I watched him look at Marcus, actually look at him, process who he was seeing, and then look at me. I held his gaze. I did not smile. I did not look away. I simply looked at him with the same quiet expression I had learned to hold in rooms far more difficult than this one. The expression of someone who has nothing to prove because the proof is already in the room. Marcus, who missed very little, leaned close and said softly, "Is that your father?" "Yes," I said. He considered this for a moment. "Would you like me to handle this or would you like to?" "Let me," I said. I stood, told Zara I would be right back and walked to where my family was standing. The walk across the dining room was approximately 30 feet. Felt like nothing. I had walked into rooms where the stakes were 100 times higher than this. Rooms where a wrong word could collapse a campaign, strand a client, and a career. 30 feet across Tavola's warm amber dining room was nothing. My mother recovered first. She always does. She is a social animal and social animals find their footing. "Simone," she said with the careful brightness of someone defusing something. "We didn't know you'd be here." "I made the reservation 6 weeks ago," I said pleasantly. "You have a reservation here?" Aunt Carol said. Her tone contained the particular frequency of someone who has just discovered the ceiling is lower than they assumed. "A standing relationship with the restaurant," I said, which was technically true in more ways than one. My father had not spoken. He was looking at me with an expression I had not seen on his face before, and I had catalogued many of his expressions over 39 years. "The man at your table," he said finally. His voice was careful. "Is that Governor Delaney?" I said. "Yes." "You know the governor?" "He's Zara's godfather," I said. "Has been since her christening." Another silence. Dr. Whitfield, my father's colleague, made a small sound that might have been a cough. My father looked at Zara, who had climbed partially into the governor's lap and appeared to be explaining something at length. "How?" my father said, and this was the question I had waited without knowing I was waiting for him to ask. "How do you know Marcus Delaney?" "I ran his first campaign," I said. "When he was a city councilman. I've been his primary strategic advisor for 11 years. The silence that followed was a different quality of silence than the ones before. It had weight. "You ran," my mother stopped. "You run political campaigns." "I run a political strategy and public affairs firm," I said. "Meridian Consulting. We have 41 employees. The governor is our longest-standing client." Aunt Carol opened her mouth. "Aunt Carol," I said without looking at her, "I love you. But I'm not finished." She closed her mouth. I looked at my father. "Dad," I said, "I have tried in ways I am still not sure you noticed to share this part of my life with you. I invited you to our firm's 5th anniversary event. You had a conference. I sent you the press release when we won our first Senate race. Mom said it sounded stressful. I brought Meridian materials to Christmas 3 years ago and left them on the counter and they were in the recycling bin before dinner was over." My father's jaw tightened. "I'm not saying this to wound you," I said, and I meant it. "I'm saying it because I need you to understand that the distance between us is not made of my absence. It's made of your attention. Simone." My mother's voice had gone soft. "Mom," I said, "you told me this morning that I would make tonight awkward. You told me it was for family and important people." I let that sit for a moment. I am family. And I think after tonight we might have a different conversation about what important means. I looked at my father one more time. He was a man of 71 who had spent his entire adult life being the most important person in every room he entered. He had the posture of it, the vocabulary of it, the expectation of it woven into his bones. And he was standing in the entrance of Tavola understanding, perhaps for the first time, that his daughter had been in rooms he could not have imagined, and he had never once asked to hear about them. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said. "Daniel will make sure your table is wonderful. The duck is exceptional tonight." I turned and walked back to table 1. Marcus raised an eyebrow when I sat down. "Well," he said. I said what I needed to say. He nodded, handing Zara back to me. "Good." "It wasn't a victory," I said. "No," he agreed. "These things rarely are." Zara looked up at me with the unfiltered perception of 5-year-olds. Mama, was that Grandpa? Yes, baby. Why didn't he come say hi? I tucked a curl behind her ear. He needed a minute. She considered this with great seriousness. Okay, she said, and returned her attention to the bread basket, which she had been methodically working through. Marcus poured more water into my glass without being asked. A small thing, the thing a person does when they have known you long enough to see when you need it, and we returned to dinner. Across the room I was aware of my family being seated. I did not watch them. I did not need to. I had said what was true, and the truth had its own momentum now. What I did not know until Renata told me the next morning was what happened after I walked away. Dr. Whitfield, my father's colleague, leaned over and said, Emmanuel. Meridian Consulting. I've been trying to get a meeting with them for 8 months. My hospital group needs a federal regulatory strategy. They turned us down, said they were at capacity. He paused. That's your daughter's firm. My father did not respond. My mother, who had pulled out her phone with the frantic energy of someone who has just discovered they have been reading a map upside down, was reading Meridian's website. She found the About page. She found the client list, redacted as they always are, but the scope evident. She found a photograph from a campaign event in 2019, in which I was standing with 3 U.S. senators and a former Secretary of State, all of whom were laughing at something I had apparently said. He showed it to my father. He looked at it for a long time. Diane, who had been quiet through all of it, excused herself after the appetizers arrived and went to the restroom, where she called me. I let it ring. I was in the middle of a story Marcus was telling about a trade delegation to Japan that had involved a missing briefcase and a very confused interpreter, and I had not laughed like that in weeks. I texted her later. I'm glad you called. Let's have coffee this week. Just us. She responded in 4 minutes. Yes. I'd like that. I'm sorry, Simone. It was not everything. But it was a beginning. Renata came over the next morning with pastries from the Lebanese bakery on Grace Street that she knew I loved, and we sat in my kitchen while Zara watched her Saturday morning cartoons with the focused intensity she brings to most things she cares about. So, Renata said, settling into the chair across from me with the calm of someone who has waited patiently for a story. So, I said, tell me. I told her. She listened the way she always listens, completely without interjecting, saving her reaction for the end. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Did it feel like you thought it would? She said. This was the right question. Renata always asks the right question. No, I said. I thought it would feel like, I don't know, resolution. Like something snapping into place. But it just felt like telling the truth, which was necessary. And now it's done, and we're still going to have to figure out what comes next. She nodded. That's usually how it goes. Zara wandered into the kitchen, assessed the pastry situation, selected a cheese roll with the seriousness of a sommelier, and wandered back out. She's going to run something someday, Renata said, watching her go. God help them, I said, and meant it with total love. My father called me that afternoon. I was in my home office reviewing a briefing document for a client strategy session on Monday, and my phone buzzed with his name on the screen. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I answered. Simone, he said. Dad. Pause. My father is not a man who uses silences for dramatic effect. He is too controlled for that. This silence was different. It was the silence of a man looking for an entry point into a conversation he did not know how to have. Your firm, he said finally. I looked it up this morning. Hey, I said. You have 41 people. 42 as of last Monday. We hired a new data director. Another pause. I didn't know, he said. Any of it. I didn't know what you were building. No, I said quietly. You didn't. I should have asked. The words were simple. They were not an apology. My father, I have come to understand, is constitutionally incapable of a direct apology, in the same way that some people are colorblind, not from malice but from a specific and unchangeable limitation. But they were the closest thing to one I was likely to get. And they were real. I could tell they were real because of how uncomfortable they made him, and my father does not volunteer discomfort. Yes, I said. You should have. I'd like to, he said. Ask. If you're willing. I looked out my office window. The afternoon was overcast, one of those late autumn days that can't decide what it wants to be. I had a full week ahead of me, The briefing on Monday, a strategy session with the Senate campaign on Tuesday, a call with Marcus's chief of staff about the federal infrastructure announcement they were shaping. I was tired in the way I often was, the bone-deep productive tiredness of a life running at full capacity. I'm willing, I said. But Dad, I need you to understand that I'm not starting from the beginning. I'm not going to justify the years. I'll tell you what I'm doing now and where I'm going, and I'll let you be part of that if you want to be. But I'm not rebuilding a case for who I am. The silence was longer this time. Understood, he said. It was, I thought, the most honest exchange we had had in years. There is something I have not said yet, and it is the thing that sits beneath all of this like a root system beneath concrete. I missed my father. Not the version of him who had not asked. I missed the version of him I had glimpsed occasionally when I was small. At the dinner table when he talked about a particularly difficult surgery he had navigated, at my school concerts when he did not know I was watching him watch me, at the airport once when he had come home from a conference and hugged my mother in the baggage claim with both arms and his eyes closed. That man was real. He was inside the man who had not asked. The same way the person I had been at 22, uncertain, ambitious, terrified, reaching, was still inside the woman seated at table 1. We do not stop being our earlier selves. We just build rooms around them. I was not naive enough to believe one dinner changed the architecture of a lifetime. I knew my mother would process this through the lens of social navigation. What to say to her friends, how to frame my success in a way that also reflected well on her. I knew Aunt Carol would require time and possibly several more uncomfortable encounters before she adjusted her verdict. I knew that my father's call was a beginning, not an arrival, and that there would be dinners ahead where the old patterns would resurface, where he would dispense approval selectively, where I would feel the familiar draft. But something had shifted the way tectonic things shift. Not visibly, not all at once, but in the deep structure. He had seen me. Not the image of me he had maintained, but the actual person seated at table 1, unhurried, connected, known. He had seen what I had built in the years he had not been watching, and the seeing had reached him somewhere real. That was not nothing. I had spent enough years in politics to know that reaching someone real is harder than it looks and more valuable than almost anything else. The following Saturday, I took Zara to the park near our house, the one with the old oak trees and the unreliable water fountain that she has accepted as a personal challenge. She wore her yellow rain boots despite the fact that it was not raining because she is 5 and this is her right. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't immediately recognize. This is your father. I got your message from Diane about Saturday coffee. I was wondering if I might join. I'll understand if you'd rather it be just the two of you. Dad. He had signed it. Dad. As if I might not know. I held the phone for a moment. Zara was attempting to navigate a puddle of indeterminate depth with the strategic approach of someone planning a military crossing. You can come, I typed. Coffee is at 11. Bring the good pastries from the place on Chain Bridge Road. 3 dots appeared. Then I know the one. I put my phone in my pocket. Mama, Zara called from the puddle. I made it. I see that, I said. She raised both arms in triumph, rain boots gleaming in the pale November light. I took a picture of her that I did not post anywhere, that I kept only for myself. The kind of moment that belongs to no audience. There is a version of this story that ends with a clean reckoning. With my family transformed, with my father repentant and remade, with every year of being unseen paid back in one luminous dinner at table 1. I would be lying if I said part of me did not want that version. But the true version is this. I walked back to my daughter after telling my father the truth, and we had the rest of our dinner, and the duck was in fact exceptional, and Marcus told 3 more stories from the Japan trip that kept getting longer in the way good stories do, and Zara fell asleep in the car on the way home with her head against the window and her good shoes still on. And I carried her inside. And that was enough. The rest. My father learning to ask, my mother recalibrating her image to include the actual me, Aunt Carol arriving at whatever truth she would eventually arrive at. That was all still ahead. It would not be swift. It would not be clean. But the reservation had been under my name for 11 years. And now they knew it. That was where we would begin. If you've ever built something real while the people who should have been watching weren't, this one was for you. Drop a comment below. Did you ever have a moment when someone finally saw what you'd actually made? I read every single one.